Your home for Alabama sports, Tide 100.9, and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
It is 11 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. Time once again for Southern Fried Sports right here on your home for University of Alabama Athletics, Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. The show, as always, brought to you by Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. That's where you're, of course, going to find Peterbrook Chocolatier. Joined as always on the program by executive producer Josh Smith, who together we combined to form the 60-minute band of Sports Talk Radio. And Josh, I can happily report we made it. We made it to Oahu. It was a long Tuesday, yes, and it is a game day, by the way, out here. We do have Rainbow Wahine basketball action. I am literally, along with the chocolate lady, we are 33 floors up of this Hilton property here in lovely Waikiki. I am surveying the island of Oahu from up at this vantage point right now. And I can see the Stan Sheriff Center off in the distance, where tonight the Rainbow Wahine welcome the Gauchos of UC Santa Barbara. So we're here, Josh. We made it.
So instead of Man on the Streets, you got Man on the Island edition.
Man on the Island. Yeah. Man on the Island today for you. We're going to be out here the rest of the week. So the studio set up today, Josh, ain't all that bad, okay? I'll just go ahead and let you know. I may have to get a picture out or something as we move throughout the show. But we've got a lot to get into on the program, because back home in sweet Alabama, it was a busy Tuesday afternoon, a busy Tuesday evening of sports action. Alabama baseball, some good news on that front as the Crimson Tide wins its 13th straight to open the 2020 season. Last night, not so good over at Coleman Coliseum. Was that a bubble I heard pop all the way out here, 4,000 miles away last night? Yesterday afternoon here, really. Was that a bubble I heard pop, Josh? In Tuscaloosa?
It would have been about it. I want to say as surprising as Deontay Wilder's loss, but it was about as big of a upset as that.
What's surprising about that 87 to 79 defeat last night is the 87. You know, Vanderbilt isn't that Vanderbilt. There have been some Vanderbilt teams that came into Tuscaloosa and they put 87 on you. You felt like, well, you know, that's Vanderbilt basketball. Had some guys that could knock down three-point shots. You know, some pretty prolific scoring teams. That Vanderbilt team last night wasn't one of them. I can go ahead. Breaking news there. That Vanderbilt team wasn't one of those Vanderbilt teams. And so that's the most surprising development about the game last night. There you go. Breaking news. It was a super Tuesday. It wasn't so super for us from the local standpoint. But, yeah, give Vanderbilt a ton of credit. You shoot the basketball the way the Commodores did, and you're going to beat a lot of people. And you're certainly going to beat an Alabama team that was, once again, down John Petty Jr. Petty unable to go last night. But, again, scoring the basketball wasn't the problem. And perhaps what I've missed or overlooked in all this is that John Petty is probably one of this team's top 2 or 3 defenders at this point. And really, once you get past Herbert Jones, who is Alabama's next best defender? Who is it? Yeah.
Really, or a three-point shot.
Yeah. Jalen Forbes, I think, has potential to be a really good defensive player. I think in time he will be. Not there yet. So maybe that's an aspect of John Petty's game that we hadn't talked about enough since he's been forced to miss a few games here. But Saban Lee for Vanderbilt was unstoppable with 38 points. Had 20 in the first half, 18 in the second half, 6 of 7 from three-point range. And this is a Vanderbilt team that a month or so ago, at home against Tennessee, went 0 for 25 from three-point range. Last night at Coleman Coliseum, 15 of 28. That's tough to beat. That's tough to beat. And really for Alabama, it was a two-man show for the entire first half. It was Kyra Lewis and it was Beetle Bolden. And good for Beetle Bolden, by the way, on his senior night. How about 24 points for the grad transfer on 7 of 12 from 3? The 5 turnovers you don't like as much. Kyra was, if Kyra were on a top 3 or 4 team in the league, you'd have to be talking about Kyra Lewis Jr. right now for SEC Player of the Year. As it is there a spot on the first team, on the All-SEC first team? You would think there would be, but it's a point guard heavy league. But Kyra with 30 last night. He has 8 assists and just 1 turnover in 39 minutes on the ball. So offensively, Shackelford got going in the second half, hit one of his stretches, as he's often apt to do, especially here over the second half of the season. He was exceptional on the offensive end down the stretch. But when the game was on the line with about 6-7 minutes to go, and it really started in the first half, at about the 8-minute mark of the first half, well, Alabama looks like it's in pretty good shape, up 5. And then Vandy proceeds to go on a 20-8 run to close out the first 20 minutes. And then down the stretch of the second half, finishing halves. Down the stretch of the second half last night, Alabama goes on a 6+ minute drought in terms of field goals. Meanwhile, Vandy finishes the game by going 5 of 5 from the field, made its free throws too. And Alabama, of its last 11 shots in the game last night, 1 of 11. So the inability to finish, once again, could mean the finish to Alabama's NCAA tournament at-large bid hopes. You got to think at this point. I mean, you lose to a 1-15 Vanderbilt team at home. That's got to pretty much be it, doesn't it? At this point, you're trying to get a win on Saturday at Missouri to best position yourself from a seeding perspective, but based on my math, it looks like Alabama is almost locked into that 8-9 game. And if you're in that 8-9 game, you're going to see Kentucky in front of all those Big Blue fans up in Nashville, the Big Blue Invitational, as it's become known. We'll talk with Cecil Hurt more about it, though, coming up in just a little bit. We got Cecil checking in with us. He was at Coleman Coliseum, of course, last night. So we'll see what Cecil has to say. 205-342-9904. That's the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line. If you'd like to jump on board with us on this Wednesday morning, we'd love to hear from you. Again, though, some better news, Josh, over at the Baseball Diamond, just across the drive there from Coleman Coliseum. Yesterday afternoon, the Alabama baseball team dimes South Alabama. And there's some years you can catch USA, and they've got some legitimately strong baseball teams down there. But Alabama takes care of business once again in impressive fashion. 12-2 the final. Tyler Gentry just keeps hitting home runs. His second 2-home-run game of the season. We talked about this earlier in the week, too. Alabama, through its first 12 games, 48 extra base hits. That's 4 a game, even with my limited public school, not so good math background. I can tell you that's 4 extra base hits a game. How about 6 more yesterday in the win over the Jags for Alabama? Gentry with a couple of home runs. Prater homered again. 6 extra base hits in all. Gentry had half of Alabama's RBI total in the game. It's 6 RBI. Those 2 bombs and a run-scoring single helped produce those numbers for Tyler Gentry. You had Alabama pitchers, kind of a Johnny Holstaff situation. That's what you typically see midweek, especially when you've got 2 midweek games, which Alabama was supposed to have a second midweek game today, this afternoon at the Joe, but inclement weather apparently postponed UNA and Alabama set for this afternoon. So the count is on to see if this Alabama team can snap that 15-game win streak to open the 1997 season. That was a pretty good Alabama baseball team in 1997, maybe the best of all time when you talk about Alabama baseball. So that objective, that goal is within Alabama baseball's reach. You're going to have the Bisons of Lipscomb in town, in Tuscaloosa this weekend. So the opportunity with a sweep of Lipscomb, and I'm not going ahead and putting that one down in the book, by the way. Lipscomb did take 2 of 3 from Ohio State last weekend. I believe Lipscomb 8-3 on the season. Then you get back into midweek action, and then the weekend after this, you're looking at SEC play cranking up in Tuscaloosa with the Tigers of Missouri coming to town. A Missouri team that should be, by the way, motivated each and every week because, as we know, the appeal to have that postseason ban overturned in relation to the NCAA sanctions levied against Missouri baseball and some other programs in that athletic department was denied. So that's what it looks like for Alabama baseball now moving forward. 205-342-9904. Let's go there right now. The Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line and check in with Donald on a Wednesday morning. Donald, how you doing?
I'm jealous.
You know who I'm jealous?
In the swamp, and you're out there drinking Rainbow Wahine country and just having a good time. So I'm jealous.
You know, it's early out here though. I'm doing drive time radio out here. It's a little after 7 o'clock in the morning out here. So it's straight out of the scratcher and onto the radio airwaves. But look, I'm not complaining. Trust me, the view is fantastic. And so it's all good for sure.
Well, I'm sure that you've got a nice cup of coffee right there beside you to help you get your blood stirring this morning.
You know, that is absolutely the case. You are right on it, Donald. You know the deal. You absolutely do.
Like I said, I'm jealous. Sound like a broken record, but I've supported this basketball program for several years, more years than I want to almost count. But I think last night Nate Oates got a firsthand look at how mediocre this program is. I mean, he saw firsthand last night the problems this program's had over the last 12 to 13 years in choking and must-win games. And I think he's seen it all year. And he made a comment last night that the culture of the program has not changed since he's been here yet. And that's discouraging because it doesn't speak well of the players. And I don't put this on the coaches because they can only do so much. But I put this on the players, and there were several players last night that did not give a full effort, a full accounting of good effort in a must-win game, namely Alex Reid, who was a 1 of 9 or 1 of 10 for the field, who wouldn't dive on the floor for a loose ball when everybody else was diving on the floor for it. He didn't want to get his knees scarred or his face messed up trying to dive after a loose ball that could have been a big play for Bama at the time. And just very discouraging in terms of the effort. And the coach was talking about the effort after the game last night. And he's mentioned that several times this year. And this has been an ongoing problem for this program since before Coach Oates got here.
Credit to you, Donald. You've talked about it, and you sort of, were taking that wait and see approach because of what we've seen with this program in the month of February and into March, and how it has struggled down the stretch of regular seasons to close things out. So you were on full watch. I'll give you credit for that. And, there's a couple of things there. It's great if you're a skill set fit for a particular system, but with Nate Oates, he's not just looking for skill set guys. He's looking, as much as anything, for mindset guys. So whereas you might be an excellent fit for what Nate Oates likes to do, especially on the offensive end of the floor, if you can't replicate that effort on the defensive end or in loose ball situations or 50-50 balls that you alluded to, eventually he's going to find that guy that can do it in all those areas, check all those boxes. And that's when I think you'll see the complete transition made to more of what Nate Oates basketball wants to be or potentially will be at the University of Alabama.
Well, the thing about it is this year with this group, I don't expect them to win another game.
You don't like them on the road Saturday?
No, I don't. Just because you don't know what you're going to get with effort. I mean, you just don't know what you're going to get. And I think that I believe they should stay home from the NIT. They may not even get an NIT bid for all we know. But even if they were to get one, I would just not go and embarrass themselves anymore because, I mean, when you talk about a team in 90 in and 90 out, you have to question their effort. And Oates has done that at least 4 or 5 different times this year. It makes you wonder about the mindset of the players and all. But, I mean, I think he's going to have to overhaul the roster. I think there's some players that are currently on this roster that probably will not be here next year. And because, like you said, he wants his players and to have his mindset for his program. And he now knows what he's got to work with up and down the 1 to 13 or 1 to 15 or whatever's left. And I think there's some guys on that roster that will not be here. And namely, I think Alex Reid needs to consider the portal because, you know, he's an offensive player, and when he's not shooting the ball good, he's a liability defensively. Galen Smith, he's a foul machine who's been a project from the time he got here. And I mean, he's got some guys coming in next year that will fit his system. He's already got Rojas here and maybe Jawan Gary a bit, I don't know. But also the kid from Canada, the Hilton kid from Canada is coming in, and maybe we'll cover
Keon Ambrose Hilton. Maybe Josh Primo, they end up landing. We'll see. Yeah. I hear you, Donald. It's frustrating, I know, for Alabama fans right now, and as frustrating it is for you and other fans, you can just hear it, read it, see it on the face of Nate Oates following games last night. Hey, Donald, appreciate the call, my friend.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
There he goes, Donald checking in. Not happy after that Alabama loss last night. And again, it's one thing late in the season if perhaps you're not getting the job done as much on the road. But for Alabama, this is going to be, in retrospect, going to be all about the home court. It really is. And its inability to take care of business. And, you know, we've documented the legitimate reasons for some of that. Petty goes down. Herb Jones went down, been limited. You know, we understand all that. But in games like last night against an opponent that is 1-15 in the league and hasn't won on the road in the SEC in 2 full calendar years, you got to get home last night. And the last thing you want to hear is the head coach, pretty much 30 games in the season, admonishing his team because effort is still an issue. It can't happen. And I get it. I get Nate Oates' frustration. Let's go back to the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line at 205-342-9904. Check in with Corey before we head to a break and catch up with Cecil Hurt in segment number 2. Corey, how you doing this morning? No softball tonight, Corey. No softball for the Alabama.
Yeah, a little disappointed, Travis, but I understand when rain comes, you got to protect the players and the fans too. But I just want to get your opinion on this weekend about Arkansas. Do you think Alabama will win the series, or do you think they'll struggle with Arkansas? Because when you look at Arkansas, they have a really good team. I mean, I know they haven't faced the greatest competition when they faced the 2 ranked teams they played. They lost both of them. But when you look at Mary Haff and Autumn Storms, they're 2 of the best pitchers in the SEC. And their offense, I think they're 3rd in the league in batting. And they've hit 25 home runs. And they're going to be a tough out to deal with.
Has Arkansas played anyone along the lines of what Alabama's seen, though, during this pre-conference season? Really?
They played Baylor and they played Florida State, and they lost them by 1 run each. But other than that, they've won. I think they lost to Bradley and they lost to Montana. Other than that,
the Grizz. You got to watch out for the Grizz. Yeah, you know, I mean, Arkansas is a top 20 team. There's no denying that. And as we've talked about with the way that programs have elevated themselves within the Southeastern Conference each and every weekend is a challenge. But I think it's going to be fascinating more so from the Alabama perspective than I think it's going to be just considering the opponent. You know, what do we expect this weekend from Montana Fouts? You know, how does the sort of pitching lineup now that you get into Southeastern Conference play? You know, can this lineup produce 1 through 9 through the order, defensively up the middle? You know, will we see some strides being made continually as you push through SEC play? And I think that's it. It's still all about Alabama right now. Even going into Southeastern Conference play, if those things happen and Fouts is back to being who she was a year ago to go along with Kilfoyle, Crystal Goodman, Cornell, you've got the pitching depth. That's first and foremost the number one priority. But yeah, I would say there's more questions about this Alabama team going into league play than any of us would have thought 3 or 4 months ago.
I told Gary Harris this morning that I think what people fail to realize is that the infield is not what it's supposed to be with Claire Jenkins being out. Yeah. And then where you had to shuffle some people in, and then with Alyssa Brown not being in the outfield, and Jenna Johnson's done a really good job replacing her, but you would prefer a senior over a freshman out there. And then when you look at the lineup, you have 3 freshmen in there when you're supposed to have a senior in Alyssa Brown and another senior with Claire Jenkins. I know Claire Jenkins is not going to play this year. When you have 3 freshmen with Savannah Woodard, Jenna Johnson, and Abby Dorr. So the lineup's more underclassmen mostly. So it's a little bit different. But I do like the lineup at times. But the thing about this Arkansas game is that it's going to be our offense versus their pitching is what concerns me, because their pitching is very good. And so if we can make contact against their pitching, because their pitching strikes you out a lot, if we can make contact and put the ball in play, I think that'll give us some good reason to feel good about winning. But
it's all about consistent pressure in fast pitch softball on the defense.
How would you predict the series this weekend?
I would say, I think a reasonable prediction would be Alabama takes 2 of 3. I think it's very possible Alabama could sweep the series. But with the way that Alabama has had to deal with some things, with the way Murph has had to juggle some things, I think early in the conference season, if we're being realistic, probably 2 out of 3. Hey, Corey, we got to get to this break, get to Cecil Hurt. Appreciate the call as always.
You too, Travis. Roll Tide.
There he goes. Corey checking in with us. We're going to head to that break. When we come back, Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com joins us when Southern Fried Sports returns on Tide 100.9 FM right after this. Into the 90s? Yeah, that one right there. It's a shame about Ray. It was a shame about Alabama men's basketball last night. And joining us now to talk about the Crimson Tide and a number of other topics here on this Wednesday morning, Cecil Hurt, sports editor, columnist for the Tuscaloosa News. I'm not trying to, send some sort of subliminal messages today with the playlist, Cecil. The Lemonheads, a lemon of a tight performance last night for Alabama. But what does this mean for Alabama basketball with what's left of this season?
Well, it's a bad loss. They were on the outer rim of the bubble anyway, but you can't survive. Not just this loss, but, they've had 4 home losses in February and March on their home floor against teams they were favored by 3 to 12 points. Lost all 4 of them. So didn't lose every, they beat South Carolina at home. They beat LSU at home. Probably better teams than the ones that they lost to. But you can't drop 4 home games down the stretch and expect to be involved in anything.
So Nate Oates, post game, you were there. On in terms of frustration level, where was he at last night compared to maybe some other times during the season?
Yeah, he was pretty frustrated. Probably not the most, but I think early in the season when he was getting to know his team and so forth. I think there were some times when he was frustrated. They didn't play great their first 2 games down in the Bahamas, but. It's disappointing. There are some legitimate injury issues, but now Vanderbilt's got legitimate injury issues too. You didn't see Aaron Naismith out there for Vanderbilt either, so you have to work around those things. It hurt that Petty couldn't play, that Herb's not 100%. Vanderbilt went small. That created some matchup problems. Alabama just doesn't have enough guys who can guard on the perimeter, but when a team does something like that, it creates matchup problems for you. It should create matchup problems for them on the other end. And I'm not beating on Alex Reese. Alex is probably not 100% health-wise right now. but your power forward, your forward, you can call him a stretch 4 or Euro 4 or whatever. He goes 1 for 9, and all 9 of the shots that he takes are 3-pointers. And you're talking about how on the other end, well, he has a tough time guarding a small, quick guy. Probably does. But that small, quick guy's got to guard him on the other end. Why is he not he gets 3 rebounds? Why is he not getting 6, 8 offensive rebounds or shooting 5-footers or taking it, posting up and taking a post shot? That's just one example of the things that you got to do. You can't just say, well, man, it was a bad matchup because Vanderbilt was small. Well, it was just bad matchup on one end. It ought to be a bad matchup on the other end, too.
Talk about Kyra Lewis, Cecil, and I guess kind of the shame in all of this is that Kyra should be a slam dunk first-team All-SEC guy, shouldn't he? But does all this sort of chip away at his candidacy for some of those things? I know it's very much secondary to the team goals. I get that.
Yeah.
The point being, he was Kyra again last night.
Yeah, he averaged, scored 30 points and playing great. Your team's success does have something to do with that, and that'll. You say the same thing about Saban Lee, who had a tremendous game, scored 38 points, but he's going to have a tough time making any teams because he plays for Vanderbilt. Probably Mason Jones, although Mason Jones for some reason gets more love than Kyra does or Saban Lee does. And Mason Jones is a good player. That's not what I'm saying, but it may affect him some. In terms of player of the year and so forth, people are going to look at. They're going to look at Kentucky. They're going to look at LSU. They're going to look at Auburn, and those are the teams that have been successful. And that's just the nature of those kind of awards.
I guess a byproduct of Kyra's great play here, especially over the last, month and a half or so, are his NBA draft prospects.
Right.
We're kind of at the mercy of mocks at this point in the discussion, but you can get a pretty good feel for how a guy sort of stacks up in the eyes of NBA clubs, barring an NIT performance or an NIT home game, potentially in the upcoming postseason. What do you think the chances are that Kyra Lewis has possibly played his last home game at Coleman Coliseum?
It's that he's played his last home game. It's more than 50%. It's where he sits in the mocks right now. He would probably need to go. The good thing about college basketball is he gets to the end of the season. He can go through the evaluation process. He can enter his name, go work out for teams, let guys take a look, get a realistic, honest, face-to-face appraisal, and then make a decision. And that decision may be to go and it may be to come back. But he'll have a lot more information. Unlike football guys who finish, particularly if they play in a bowl game, and then 10 days later they got to make a decision that they can't change. So the basketball, whatever works out in basketball, and I think Kyra will probably go pro, but that's just my opinion. But they get a much more honest evaluation than football guys do, or at least think they're much more. A much better process, let me put it that way. I don't want to say football guys don't get honest evaluations, because they do, but teams have a chance to work them out, look at them, and players can enter in without that being the final word and no chance of return.
Yeah, you think there are a couple of guys following that combine last week that might not mind being able to go back to college, play a little more football if they could?
Sure. If they're underclassmen, yeah, absolutely. I don't know that any of the Alabama guys necessarily. I thought all the Alabama underclassmen did, more or less did pretty well. But there are plenty of guys out there who look around and they, you're a linebacker and you took an early exit. You're done, and that's it. Isaiah Simmons goes out there and you're saying, maybe I didn't want to be in the draft class with this guy. Maybe I should have been in the next draft class. I would say that there's probably, some wide receiver whether it's Laviska Chenault or whoever it is going to go in the second round. Who would have gone in the first round next year? Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is.
So for this Alabama basketball team with one regular season game to go, what's the motivation?
Huh?
What's the motivation for this team headed to Columbia, Missouri this weekend, Cecil?
Well, they should want to play better. And I will say this, they've had bad, they played bad against Texas A&M and came back and gave a pretty good effort against South Carolina. They're not, people throw words around. They're not quitters. They're not crying. So I think they'll give an effort against Missouri and see how it works out. And that's all Nate Oates is looking for.
Is this pretty much an 8-9 situation?
You can do some things in the tournament. Who knows? So it's not that these are kids without heart or without character or aren't trying. They're just not, getting the job done. Sometimes they haven't been tough enough. But they've had plenty of performances where they could go out and give another good performance. So, South Carolina, Ole Miss, they could do that. So I don't, it's not a situation where I think they, lost to Vanderbilt, going to chuck it. Now, maybe it is. That'll tell you something about, if you're Nate Oates, that tells you something about what you got to do for next year. Mm-hmm. But I think that they'll play hard.
Just when we thought we had this league figured out in relation mostly to Kentucky, we talked about this on Monday. Both very high on Kentucky Monday and really still high on Kentucky about halfway to 2/3 through that game against Tennessee last night at Rupp. And then the Vols come back from 17 down.
Yeah,
and
first of all, credit to Tennessee. Second of all, I'm still high on Kentucky. They're still a good team, but they're not a great three-point shooting team. And they can miss, and they can struggle offensively. So the player of the month in February for the SEC is probably John Fulkerson.
27 last night. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's who would ever have thought that? But that's not giving up. That's going out, giving an effort, playing hard, and credit to Rick Barnes for putting the pieces together. Good for him.
What is Alabama looking at most realistically when we talk about the SEC tournament? Is it pretty much locked in to perhaps that 8-9 game, or is there still some wiggle room?
We'll see tonight. They need either Arkansas or Missouri to lose. My guess would be Texas A&M in an 8-9.
And that puts you in line for a quarterfinal matchup, I guess, as you survive with Kentucky.
If you're to win, you get to see Kentucky. So, that's the chances you take.
I guess if you're an Alabama fan right now.
Same situation the women are in, but the women have an entirely different momentum going into their tournament.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to hit on. If you're an Alabama fan right now and you've got big dance fever, I think it sort of hinges more with the ladies at 8-8 in the league going into that big SEC tournament matchup tomorrow morning over in Greenville against the Georgia Bulldogs.
11 a.m. against Georgia. That's a big game.
Yeah,
I think Alabama wins that game and they'll get in. There's not the huge volumes of information available with women's bracketology that there is with men, or at least there are not nearly as many bracketologists. But their resumes, Alabama's resume is not bad. It's not bad. If you win that one, you're at worst a 500 team in the league. I think you win that one, and South Carolina, people say, oh, well, what about, then they got to play South Carolina. I don't think South Carolina hurts you, regardless of what happens. They could help you. If you could find a way to beat the best team in the country 90 minutes from their campus, that would sure help you, but I don't think it hurts you to play South Carolina if you get past Georgia. So it's a big game tomorrow.
Those two late road wins over Mississippi State and Texas A&M, but credit Christy Curry's team as well, because we've seen Alabama women's basketball win games like that, but then not be able to sort of put together another 2 or 3 to go along with it. And in winning 4 straight, that's absolutely been the case for the Alabama ladies here down the stretch. Talking with Cecil Hurt of the
also got those kind of home wins that you need to get, that the men needed to get. Beat Missouri, beat Florida.
Yeah.
And that counts too.
Yep. And like I said, we've seen Alabama women's basketball record some big wins. I mean, there was a stretch 4 or 5 years where Alabama took out the Lady Vols of Tennessee, the once mighty Lady Vols of Tennessee, but then would return home and drop a game to a team in the bottom half of the league or so. And
Ole Miss or somebody.
Yeah, managed to avoid that this time around. Talking with Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com here on a Wednesday edition of Southern Fried Sports presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier. Cecil, I know you and I together, we put in our tandem strength coach resume, our team resume, but we were overlooked by Nick Saban for David Ballou and Matt Ray. Your thoughts on those hires becoming official?
I think it's great. It does sound that sounds like two guys that would just the name down there in Jacksonville, that Florida Tag Team Championship on the line against Mr. Wrestling 1 and 2 versus David Ballou and Dr. Matt Ray. That
All right, it could be like a couple's assistant show late night on some Sirius channel or something,
Yeah, and it's got that you got the power guy and you got the speed guy, the tag team dynamic. But setting that aside, I think that's the direction that NFL teams have gone, and I think that's the direction Nick Saban wanted to go all along. And that's not a criticism of Scott Cochran, but it's just I think he wanted to take advantage of what they're going to have facilities wise. Wanted a different approach to not just as we've talked about, not just putting as many plates as you can on the bar and going in there and squat, but a lot of different kinesiological metrics. And so I'm not going to sit here and say I know everything about every measurable on Indiana's roster, but I think Indiana's gotten better during the time that those guys have been up there. So if they can make Alabama better, then and that's what Nick Saban thinks, then more power to them.
We're a week and a half away, Cecil, from the start of spring football practice at the University of Alabama. Is there an area of this team, because of the large, ultra-large, bigger-than-life large shadow that the quarterback position at UA casts, is there an area of this team maybe to you that isn't being talked about as much that maybe needs to be?
Well, all the areas. I mean, I think people feel like the running back situation is good or better than good. The receivers will still be good. You still got Waddle. You still got Devontae. Offensive line should be fine, even with Jedrick Wills going in the first round. You've got Leatherwood. You've got Dickerson. You've got Deontay Brown. So I think offensively people feel pretty good. Defensively, I think people should probably talk more about the front guys, and that's an area, front seven guys. And again, as important as quarterback is, Dylan Moses, to stretch an analogy a little bit, but not too far, he's the quarterback, was the quarterback of the defense last year and couldn't play, and will be the quarterback of the defense this year. So I think that he's not going to do a lot this spring, but I think seeing how that group develops, they've got new coaching up there on the defensive front with Freddie Roach. I think that's an intriguing area.
Yeah, and you're right. Even if Dylan Moses doesn't do a lot, which you wouldn't expect that he would, just his presence out there with those guys has got to help. It's got to help Pete Golding, He
and Josh McMillan,
Yeah, both those guys.
That's people talked about Terrell's comments and, getting plays in and so forth. And you can take those how you want. But part of it is if you're relaying those plays to two veteran intelligent guys like Moses and McMillan, that's different than having two true freshmen out there. And Shane Lee and K.O. hadn't played very much. Christian and those guys, it was all new to them.
Yeah.
So that should help the process too. So,
and they're still trying to figure out what they have to do, and now you're asking them to communicate to everybody else what they need to do. I mean, the sort of blowback from all that this week, it was just pretty much no kidding to me, right? I mean, yeah, they struggled with communication on defense, and as much as any reason, the one you just talked about. You had, two true freshmen at the inside linebacker spots, including your every down inside linebacker. It absolutely should have been. You had Xavier McKinney trying to make calls for everybody from the secondary. That's tough.
Right.
That's you are certainly going to have issues in years in which that is the case. Well, Cecil, as always, we appreciate the time, my friend.
All right. Enjoy it. Good luck with our
Rainbow Wahine.
Yeah. And I know it'll go well for them.
Appreciate that, Cecil. I finally get to have prime time with the Rainbow Wahine instead of late night. That's not a bad thing. Appreciate it. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com. It is going to be nice tonight to be able to go over to the Stan Sheriff Center and watch a tip-off at 7 o'clock local time instead of 11 o'clock, in the recliner with that stream going on the old Apple television. Foo the Pomeranian snorting over there. He could care less. He could not care less, even, about those 11 o'clock tip-offs. Back with more Southern Fried Sports on a Wednesday right after this. You know what, Josh Smith? I may have to go downstairs after the show and rent me out a longboard, show them how it's done out there in the Pacific Ocean. You know what I mean?
Well, I didn't know that you surfed back in the day.
Back in the day, absolutely. Growing up on the east coast of Florida. Whenever there was a nor'easter off the coast of northeast Florida back in the early to mid 80s, the male attendance rate at Edward H. White Senior High School on the west side of Jacksonville would dip significantly because with that nor'easter, you'd get some prime surf. And so the boys would load up and roar out there to Atlantic Beach, maybe down to Volano. Volano, you had to be careful because you'd get some bigger surf down at the Volano Beach, which is just a little bit north of St. Augustine, kind of in between Ponte Vedra, which is where you're going to have your Players' Championship next week on the PGA Tour. But at Volano, you'd get some maybe bigger surf, but the waves would break later, and you could end up into the beach pretty good if you weren't comfortable. I may have to go down there, though, get me a little longboard, get out there, walk up and down that baby. Huh? Just show them how it's done. Show them how people from Alabama get it done in the surf.
I could only imagine Pops getting out surfing with me, too.
My stepfather, David Whip Wheeler, he was, and probably could still do it, at right around 70 years of age. We got to come back out here for graduation. I know, right? Cry me a river. Got to go back out there. Got to come back out in May for graduation for the oldest daughter. And that stepfather will be in tow on that trip. And I'm sure he's going to get a longboard and he's going to go to work. Even at 70, I think he could still do it. Absolutely. 205-342-9904. That's the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line. Thanks again to Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com joining us in that previous segment. Once again, if you were anticipating Alabama softball tonight, that game against Alcorn State has been canceled, so you'll have to wait until this weekend's SEC opening series at the Rhodes House with the Arkansas Razorbacks coming to town. Alabama baseball that was scheduled for this afternoon has been postponed. The Lions of UNA were set to come down from Florence. That has been postponed. So you'll have to wait until Friday for Alabama baseball to return to the Joe, 3 games against Lipscomb. Going to head to our final break. When we come back, we'll put a wrap on a Wednesday edition of Southern Fried Sports right here on Tide 100.9 FM right after this.